The Australian War Memorial has unveiled a tribute to those who fought in the Battle of Long Tan during the Vietnam War. The bloody encounter, which claimed the lives of 18 Australian soldiers, took place 41 years ago today. The memorial has commissioned a movie reconstructing the battle down to the finest detail.
What we're doing is we're saying this is what it was like for our diggers. We want you to maybe hear and see a lot of what went on.
The film will be used as the centrepiece at the museum's new galleries, honouring Australians who've served overseas since 1945. And joining us in the studio now is Martin Walsh, who has produced a documentary and is working on a feature film on Long Tan. Martin, welcome. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you.
Well, I guess Long Tan is seen as a very important battle in Australian history, but of course we've been saying this afternoon there are other bigger battles. Why is Long Tan so special?
I think it was probably one of the first iconic battles where there was a small unit of roughly a company of Australian troops that actually fought pretty much a regiment of enemy troops, and probably not since World War II or even Korea had an event like that taken place. And it was a very intense event, really only over about 3.5 hours. So it was very, very close combat, and it was an amazing outcome as well.
There's been some controversy, and it stays today from Major Harry Smith, as to the decorations that were received by the survivors of Long Tan. He argues they should have had higher decorations. What's your feeling about all of that? How much heroism was there?
I'm very frustrated because when I first read the very first book by Lex Macaulay on the subject, I was very angry afterwards, and because of what you said. Literally what the citations that Harry wrote for his men were effectively downgraded, and there's really not a precedent for that, and they were unaware of that for roughly 30-35 years because of the Freedom of Information Act. They actually discovered that the original citations were actually downgraded by bureaucrats back in Australia. And there's many other acts of heroism, and what's very frustrating is, you know, in the US recently they gave a Medal of Honour to a Vietnam helicopter pilot, and you know, in the US there's no time constraints on, you know, bravery and heroism, and realistically, as I said, there were a lot more heroic actions than even the ones that were cited.
As you say, heroism is the key word, isn't it? I mean, from what we are still learning, that the things that they had to endure in that intense 3-hour battle was incredible.
Yeah, well, I mean, even not just the men themselves that were actually on the front lines, which were mainly 19, 20, 21-year-olds. And in fact, you know, the 18 soldiers that were killed, there was one from every state in Australia, and they were between 19 and 21 years old. But, you know, the artillery fired for 3.5 hours non-stop, and lightning actually hit the artillery positions twice. One of them knocked out one of the telephone exchange operators and threw him about 7 feet across the room. A couple passed out because of the cordite fumes. You know, because the rain, the actual cordite fumes wouldn't disperse. You know, the company medic, you know, had 21 Australian wounded, and literally his training was as, you know, attending medical lectures, and not one of those Australian soldiers died under his care in a ditch, you know, in the middle of that battle.
Yeah, the casualty rate was remarkably low, wasn't it, on the Australian side, given the overwhelming numbers of the enemy and given the conditions under which they were fighting?
Yeah, I think that was mainly due to the Australian tactics. Roughly between each Australian was about 10 metres. So when they were walking an extended line, they really had almost a 100-metre frontage when the enemy first attacked. And the enemy actually attacked them from slightly left front. So the enemy weren't really sure how many Australians were there because of the spacing. And in actual fact, in captured documents later, they actually thought that they were fighting the entire Australian battalion of 600 troops, because once they'd almost surrounded 11 platoon, they didn't realise that there were another 2 platoons and the company HQ about 200 metres, you know, behind them. So what would happen is the artillery would actually take out the second wave. So they would attack in waves about every 5 minutes of about 100 people, 100 VC and NVA in each wave. The artillery would take out the second wave, and they'd have to use their small arms and machine guns to take out the first wave. So it was pretty...
Just refresh our memories. 18 Australians died. How many Vietnamese?
The official count is 245, and the reason why that's the official count is they actually had to stop counting after 2 days because the government back in Australia wanted a number, you know, to basically publish to the world's media. But they did keep finding more bodies in very hurriedly dug graves.
So it could have been 400?
Well, they say between 500 and 800 and roughly 1,000 wounded. So they were actually up against about 2,500 enemy troops. And there was actually another enemy regiment that was to the northwest of Nui Dat that was ready to ambush American reinforcements coming from Saigon. That's, again, kind of lost as part of the whole story. But, you know, if the D Company hadn't have met by accident that enemy regiment, they really were going to attack the base, and they probably would have done a lot of damage. Because it was unprepared.
An amazing tale. All right. Well, just before we go, Martin, you, of course, made the award-winning documentary on the battle last year, and now you're part of a major feature film. Where's that at?
Bruce Beresford has written the script for the film, and he'll be directing. We've just recently secured another 2 international executive producers. One of them recently produced the Bridge to Terabithia film, which was a box office hit in the US and locally. So we're in the process now of starting to speak to some very well-known Australian actors. It's an ensemble cast, about 3 generations of actors. So with the executive producers that we have, international, and that cast.
To be shot here or in Vietnam?
It'll actually be shot here, most likely Queensland. We'll have to reconstruct the rubber plantation so we can blow it up. But yeah, it's about a $30 million film, which is very high for an Australian film. But really, to do the film justice, that's the kind of budget that we'll need.
A great story to be told.
Yeah.
All right.
When are we going to see that film on screen?
We were hoping late next year, but it'll probably be middle of 2009.
All right.
Yes.
Good luck with it.
Thank you very much.
Thanks for coming in.
Thank you.
Well, you're watching Sky News this Saturday afternoon. Still ahead, we'll have today's sport with Chris Rowe, including the Bulldogs win a heart-stopper against the Broncos.
And some of the world's biggest daredevils pull off an extreme stunt.